welcome to Inform News. I'm Georgia, and in tonight's news, we'll be exploring concerns surrounding young Indigenous men and substance abuse. First up, we'll be exploring how Indigenous background can affect their health. Now, let's cross live to Tegan, who's going to explain this further.
Thanks, Georgia. Indigenous Australians are often exposed to poorer health outcomes than the wider community. This is a problem for not only individuals, but also for the government and the community. There are many reasons as to why they experience such different levels of health when compared to other cultural groups in Australia. There is a major gap in life expectancy between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and the rest of the Australian population. Genetics plays an important role in the instance of disabilities and diseases. There have been a few studies conducted that have found a link between genetics and renal disease in Aboriginal individuals. This is along with many other diseases that are continuing to be studied. It seems the genetic makeup of Aboriginals is quite unfavourable towards their health. Since introducing the Western diet to the Aboriginal population, they have experienced many negative health outcomes. A major issue seen amongst young Indigenous people is alcohol and substance abuse. Alcohol abuse has a strong association with renal disease. This is more of a problem in Aboriginal individuals as they already have the genetic predisposition for this disease. This puts them into a high-risk category for renal disease due to both their genetics and lifestyle choices. Renal disease is as an example, but there are many other diseases that have the same genetic conditions.
Now let's cross live to Sean, who's going to discuss the topic of Indigenous men with substance abuse issues and the risk factors that contribute to them.
Increased substance use and abuse in the Indigenous male population is determined by social and economic risk factors. A huge factor is the intergenerational trauma caused by colonialism, cultural destruction, and economic and social exclusion, all of which negatively impact the cycle of substance abuse. Another risk factor is education disadvantage. Indigenous males suffer from lower levels of education achievement and lower levels of Year 12 completion. Academic disengagement is shown to be linked to increased substance abuse and the increased likelihood of using multiple drugs. Following from education, Indigenous males suffer from higher levels of unemployment, with unemployment encouraging and sustaining substance use and discouraging job seeking. Family and community groups may act as protective factors. Family support has been associated with increased recovery from drugs in the Indigenous population. However, the family network could itself be a risk factor in certain contexts. If a family member has a substance abuse problem, Indigenous youth may feel peer pressured to do the same. Overall, substance abuse itself is a risk factor for a huge variety of health and injury-related problems. Drug-related hospitalizations are 3.6 times more likely in the Indigenous population, and mortality rates are 1.5 times higher. Due to the increased use of injectable drugs, hepatitis C is significantly more prevalent in the Indigenous male population, as well as the increased risk of contracting HIV. Substance abuse also affects emotional well-being. Research shows marijuana use amongst the Indigenous male population was linked to depression, psychosis, and anxiety. And injectable drugs were associated with a significantly high number of mental health problems in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In conclusion, the Indigenous male population suffer from a wide variety of risk factors which increase the likelihood of substance abuse. And substance abuse itself is a risk factor for a wide variety of injury and health-related problems. Back to you, Georgia.
Thanks, Sean. To gain a better understanding of what we've discussed, we have obtained live footage to deepen our understanding.
Australia's gold rush of 1885 happened here in the wilds of the far northwest, heady days now largely forgotten. These days the remote town of Halls Creek has a different, more troubling obsession to deal with. It's the middle of the afternoon and most of these Aborigines have been drinking for several hours.
My name is Big Mama Helen.
It's not an isolated incident. This passes for normal in this quiet cattle town, and it's consuming the lives of many.
It's a huge problem in Halls Creek, and the fact of the matter is it's not getting better. It's just getting worse, and it's just out of control.
Unlike the neighbouring town of Fitzroy Crossing, 2 hours away, Halls Creek has no restrictions on alcohol. From noon every day, any adult can buy full-strength alcohol from liquor stores. When night comes, the full effect of the non-stop drinking can be seen. It often ends in drunkenness and sometimes violence and increasingly suicide. Faced with limited opportunities, many young people are killing themselves, often after drink and drug binges. This girl is 16. She says she had drunk 6 large cans of beer and some spirits. Normal for her and normal to live among the suicides.
Yeah, but grog do make people have suicide, you know? Yeah.
No more grog. Next year.
And like, it make them like have accident, you know, and make them do hanging themselves.
Grog is what they call alcohol. Some estimates suggest that in the last 2 years, as many as 200 young people have killed themselves in alcohol-related incidents.
I lost a bit of opportunities and I can't help drinking. That's the thing that's in the main life of young people, drinking. You know, that's one thing that stops all of us from doing what we want to do.
Excessive drinking is hitting women as well as men, and in addition to suicides, it has led to something called fetal alcohol syndrome, when babies are affected in the womb of an alcoholic mother.
It's a life sentence for our children, for our babies. These children will have brain damage. It will affect their learning, their ability to learn. It will affect their ability to work.
It's said that half the Aboriginal community in the region are affected in some way by fetal alcohol syndrome, and this is having dire consequences.
We're looking at a large
We now cross live to Julia, who's going to clarify the main information gained from that footage.
In the small remote town of Halls Creek in Western Australia, the problem of alcohol abuse is only getting worse. The town doesn't have any restrictions on purchasing alcohol, unlike the nearby town of Fitzroy Crossing, so people are able to purchase full-strength alcohol at any time of the day, often leading to drunkenness in the mid-afternoon, which only escalates by the night time. Alcohol is causing irreparable damage to the town, causing violence, accidents, burglaries and suicides. It's thought that 200 young people in the town have been victims to alcohol-related suicide. Indigenous females have also been increasingly vulnerable to the issue. The emergence of fetal alcohol syndrome has become a huge public health issue. Being described as a life sentence, fetal alcohol syndrome is caused by excessive alcohol consumption while pregnant and causes brain damage and learning difficulties, among other issues, to the child. One half of the Halls Creek community is thought to be affected by fetal alcohol syndrome in some way.
Thanks, Julia. To finish the program, we're going to cross live to Emma, who's going to discuss the barriers and enablers of young Indigenous men with substance abuse issues and what they may experience in accessing healthcare services.
As a young Indigenous male living with alcohol and substance abuse, there are a significant number of obstacles that can be faced each day. Thinking specifically about access to healthcare, a range of different barriers and enablers must be considered. A barrier or preventative factor reduces the ease of access to healthcare. Some of the barriers Indigenous males face include proximity to healthcare, as Indigenous people are more likely than non-Indigenous people to live in rural and remote locations. Cost of accessing health services, which includes not being able to afford services and medications that are not government subsidised or covered under private health insurance. Other costs include the transportation required to access healthcare, particularly if they do live in rural and remote locations where not all services are readily available. Finding ways to access healthcare, such as public transport or having someone else drive them, can be time-consuming and costly, as individuals with alcohol and substance abuse issues should not be driving themselves. Other obstacles they may face include discrimination, fear, mistrust, and language barriers with different health professions. Enablers are the factors that make things possible, so things that make accessing healthcare a reality for Indigenous males. Family and friends are the key enablers for individuals with substance abuse problems. People who have a relationship with the individual are often able to best get through to them. They can suggest places to receive help, as well as supporting the individual through the guidance they are receiving. Workplaces are also a significant enabler for people with alcohol and substance abuse issues. If these people are still employed, many of which are not, they can find help and guidance in both their colleagues and services provided to them in the workplace, such as free medical checkups and counselling sessions.
In conclusion, tonight we have looked at issues that surround the population of young Indigenous men with substance abuse issues. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have found the program informative and engaging. See you next time, and good night.